Well, welcome. I'm John Casper with the Oshkosh Chamber. Welcome to this week's virtual town hall. We've been sponsoring these for the last several weeks. Had great attendance, great participation. Real happy with that. Happy with the folks that have joined us. We had some of the best people in town, be part of that, including our panel today. This is a pretty big deal that's going to be coming up. We'll engage in a pretty arousing discussion within the community about what the Oshkosh Area School District has in mind in terms of facilities, referendum, and operating referendum, and which is our topic today. For those of you listening in, we will be having opportunities for Q&A at the end. So if you have a question, use the Q&A tab or the chat tab. Submit that. I'll be monitoring those, and we'll, as time allows, we'll ask those questions of our panelists at the end of that program. We are recording this, so for folks who aren't able to join us at 10, they can go back later and view this. And my guess it'll be so stimulating, a lot of people will want to view it 3 or 4 times. So that's all good stuff. We do have with us Superintendent of the Oshkosh Public Schools, Vickie Cartwright, Deputy Superintendent David Gundlach, and our newest member of the Oshkosh Area School District team, Drew, is it Niehans?
Niehans.
And he is the Executive Director of Business Services. Started in that role, I believe, July 1st. So very, very new. So welcome to Oshkosh and the district. So we're happy to have you on board. So with that, last night the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education discussed the upcoming referendum, and it appears they're moving forward with that come November. So I'm not going to get too much into that. I'll allow our team from the school district to do that, and I'll throw it over to Vickie Cartwright, Superintendent, to start that process for us.
Thank you so much, John. I know that we do have a presentation that is prepared for us to go through, so I'm hoping that we'll be able to go ahead and load that on up. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for attending this meeting, and for John and the Chamber for giving us this opportunity to be able to present some information to our community. Last night was a very important school board meeting. So last night the school board did authorize and approve for 2 separate referendum questions to be on the November 3rd ballot. So a high point in that our presentation today is going to be getting into some of the details related to those 2 separate questions. One is specifically called an operational referendum, and we'll explain what that means here in just a moment. And then the second one is related to our capital referendum. And again, so we are now officially, that decision has been made. It was a 7-0 decision last night from our school board in order to pursue both of those referendums for the November 3rd election period. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started.
One of the things that people don't always know is that there's really 2 types of school referenda, and one type is an operational referendum, one type is capital. Capital is typically your brick and mortar type situations. The operational referendum is similar to what happened in 2014 and 2016, and those are our annual expense revenue limit overrides. So those allow us to exceed the state imposed revenue limits by a set amount for annual operations. If you look at the operational referendum that we're going to in November, it really is taking care of 2 different things. If you'll remember, in 2014, we had our first referendum for learning that was $3.95 million. That was set with a 7-year term. We knew it wasn't permanent. We knew we would have to come back in 7 years. When we talked about it, we said we'd have to come back in 7 years. But back in 2014, That was what Oshkosh wanted. We had surveyed the community and they said, you know, let's do this for 7 years. Let's see what happens. In 2016, the state had continued to keep our revenue quite low in terms of inflationary increases, and that caused another $4 million deficit. And in 2016, we were successful in another referendum for learning. But those two different referendums are really were structured a little bit differently. The 2014 one, as you can see here on the graph, the majority of it, about $2.5 million of those annual expenditures, were go into retaining the educational opportunities for our kids. In other words, providing the same great education we've always provided and continuing that. The green slice there, the 1.45 million, is what allowed us to initiate our Learning Without Limits initiative. And we'll talk about that specifically in just a moment, but that's been used primarily for our technology infrastructure and technology for our students. In 2016, almost all of the referendum was used for annual operations. Just that first year in 2016, we carved out $600,000 to allow us to start the process of installing security cameras in our schools. Prior to that time, we did not have functioning security cameras in almost any of the Oshkosh schools. So obviously that was a big safety concern, and we're really happy we were able to use those dollars so effectively and install cameras throughout all 20 Oshkosh Area School District schools. Years 2 through 7, that operational referendum, that's 100% used for annual operational expenditures. So the Learning Without Limits initiative, that 1.45 million of the 7.95 total, is used to provide several different things. In the first phase, we put in a state-of-the-art infrastructure because as people are keenly aware of now, if you don't have a good technology infrastructure, it doesn't matter what you put in place, it's not going to work. We are proud to say we have one of the most advanced technology infrastructures and most solid infrastructures of any school district in the state, and we're very proud of that. Phase 2, we put in teacher support via embedded PD. The teachers required a lot of support to begin to re-engineer their curriculum and modernize their curriculum to take advantage of the devices that students and staff would be provided. Phase 3, we provided staff with the devices before the kids, and that turned out to be a really great idea because our staff had a whole year to work with devices and the embedded support to adjust instruction. And then phase 4, we began providing devices to all of our kids. And that started at the high school, went to middle, and then down into elementary. And we've done this a couple of times now. So we've been very fortunate that because we've taken advantage of cost savings, we've also been able to roll it down, not just into grade 3 through 5. Starting this year, we will be 1-to-1 in K-12. So every student in the Oshkosh Area School District will have a device to be able to learn with. I think I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Cartwright.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gundlach. So there were three very distinct benefits as a result of the operational referendums that we've had in the past. So those are the referendum for learning benefits. The first thing obviously is to ensure that our students continue to have the opportunities that they have. So this gets into the programming that we were able to provide for our students as a result of having the operational referendum in the past. The second thing is also, again, getting into providing quality staff. As you heard Dr. Gundlach speaking, we were able to go in, be very proactive, provide a lot of different types of professional developments in order to make sure that we're hitting the needs of our teachers so that they can provide that quality instruction as well. And then the third one is providing that robust academic infrastructure and support. And this is the technology piece. And this is ensuring that all of our pieces are as efficient as possible and that we are providing a high quality experience in the classroom as well as at home. Again, we were extremely appreciative of this because without this last piece, to be very candid with you, what the district just completed with the at-home learning would have been nearly impossible, if not impossible itself, because our students would not have had access to that technology and our teachers would have not had access to technology in which to provide instruction to our students. This past year, you may recall, so not this past school year, but the year before, but it had resulted in conversations and many conversations with our community. And again, going back to the Chamber of Commerce, we're extremely appreciative of the support that you provided for us when we were actively getting feedback from our community to help us to design out our new strategic plan. So based off of the feedback that we received from community members, as well as staff members, we heard loud and clear a variety of different themes. One of the themes that we definitely heard was really kind of is talking about improving student learning for all, making sure that they're college, career, and community ready. And we know in order to do that, the first thing that we've recognized where we've accomplished in the past with our operational goal, it really supports, that's ensure student opportunity. It matches very nicely into, again, the goal that was designed as a result of the feedback from our community. The second one being our dedicated and high performing team members, looking at that providing the quality staff. So you can see a direct alignment that's occurring here. And then lastly, the safe learning and working environment absolutely aligns with providing robust academic infrastructure and support, especially when you're thinking about, for example, the cameras, all the cameras that we now have in our schools in order to ensure that we are creating a safe environment for our students and also able to monitor that environment. So again, we just wanted to emphasize to you that the goals and the objectives of what our operational referendum in the past and what they were able to do is actually still right in alignment with the strategic plan that we currently have right now, which was developed based off the direct feedback from our community members and business partners. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back on over to Dr. Gundlach.
Thank you. You know, one of the things to point out, and I'll just go back to that slide for just a second, is this did not occur in a vacuum. This was a community developed strategic plan, and what the strategic plan really was aimed at was asking Oshkosh community members, what do you want from your schools? They told us this, and this is what we put in place to help deliver it. So what that means is we had to make a recommendation to the school board. How are we going to do this where we continue to prepare our students for the future opportunities and challenges and where Oshkosh does not become an outlier, but we can continue to lead in the areas we've led in. So we're going to be asking voters to renew 2 existing referendums for learning questions on the November 3rd ballot. There is no tax increase with this. This simply allows us to continue the good work we've been doing and providing the same opportunities for students. Obviously, if that's not renewed, then we have no choice. We have to make corresponding budget reductions in 21-22 and then 23-24, and that would total $7.95 million.
So we want to show the community directly what is the question going to be on the ballot. And we wanted to take an opportunity to talk about this and explain a little bit of it, because when you're looking at it in first glance, it may be somewhat confusing. And so we're going to get into the weeds just a little bit. Ultimately, what people need to understand is we're really trying to combine the 2 current operational referendums into one. We understand that there can be referendum fatigue, voter fatigue going back into the polls in order to approve the operational referendums. And so we heard loud and clear the desire to go ahead and combine those and let us come to the poll one time. Again, the emphasis on this is we're not looking for additional funding from what has already been in place. So the maximum we're looking to request with this would be the $7.95 million, which is what we currently have with our operational referendums today. The difference is we're just combining the 2 together. So the first one that we have currently right now is in the amount of $3.95 million. Currently, that is set to expire in 2021. And so that's the first portion of it. And then we currently have a second operational referendum in the amount of $4 million. And that one is set to expire in 2023. So what would happen is we'll initially start with the 3.95 because that is what is set to expire here soon. And then we'll continue with the one that we currently have, but when the second one expires, it automatically will renew and combine into this. So a maximum impact, again, being the 7.95 million. We're just putting the 2 together. Our current one of 3.95 and our current one of 4 million. Total package 7.95 million. That is why we can say that there would be no tax impact, because what's happened, and what I mean by no tax impact is there would be no increase to the current tax impact that we are currently experiencing within the Oshkosh community. So it's just a continuation, and it would put both of those in motion. And at that point in time, it would be for a total amount of 7.95 million set to expire in 2030. And it's a continuation of what we're doing right now. And so because it's a continuation, there would be no increase on the mill rate and in order to renew our current operational referendum.
So that takes us to the capital referendum. That's the second question. And there's 4 component parts to the capital referendum. The first one is safety and security, which would renovate our 7 schools and make additions to 3 of our schools. And that would cost about $8.99 million. And we'll show you that in a moment. Then there's the new elementary school that would be built on the Webster site. That would cost $35.48 million. And then the new middle school on the Merrill, adjacent to the Merrill site, which would be $53.2 million. And then lastly, the infrastructure is the fourth piece, and that is for HVAC, electrical, fire alarm generator, and roofing upgrades. That is $9.33 million. And that wrapped together is how we come to the $107 million.
And there's,
no, go ahead.
Dr. Gundlach, sorry about that. So, and you know, when we're talking about the infrastructure, there's a lot of confusion oftentimes. People are saying, well, don't you have a budget in order to be able to handle your current buildings in order to keep them up and those type of things? Absolutely, we have a budget for that. The concern though is that there are some projects that they have had some hefty price tags associated with them that are not within our budget. And so that is when we're talking about the infrastructure, that is what we're talking about. Our custodians, our maintenance department have done an exemplary job of maintaining our facilities over the years. Hence, we wouldn't even be able to have some of the facilities that we have right now open. For example, if you look at Merrill School being 120 years old, if we had not been taking care of that facility over time, it would not have lasted that long. But going back into the infrastructure component here, these are items that we just can't manage right now within our current budget. And so we wanted to make that clarification because Jim Fox does a really nice job of making sure that we stretch our dollars as much as possible in order to maintain our facilities. It's just these projects are just too large at this point in time for our normal budget. Dr. Gundlach.
So the planning and decision-making process has really been occurring for a span of years. We've come to the culmination of it right now, but it's really quite an interesting story. It started in 2017 when Bray Architects did a facility study. And what they looked at was what kind of repairs would you have to make to your facilities to continue using them? These are things such as tuck pointing and roofing upgrades, et cetera. They do not change the physical structure of the school. They do not modernize the school. They do not provide for a 21st century education in the school. It's simply, what would you have to do to keep those facilities rolling? And there were quite a few concerns with that study because there were schools like Merrill that required over $12 million that you would have to invest into a 120-year-old school just to continue to use it. So then we also, in 2018-19, we did an enrollment projection study because we wanted to have as much data as possible to provide to the board and the community as they're trying to make these decisions. We needed to know, is our enrollment spiking up, going down, staying flat, what's occurring there, and how do we predict going forward to make sure that we have the facilities that can address the needs that are coming up. We also, in 2019, as I referenced before, did our strategic planning process that was community-led. We asked them several questions around what do you want from your schools. We packaged that together into the strategic plan. And one of the top items in the strategic plan from all the community members was fix our schools. We really need to modernize these facilities. We've got to do something about these facilities. We have too many small sites. They're aging. What are we going to do? That was a big issue. So we convened in 1920 a facility advisory committee. We brought together people from all areas of the community. We had several meetings where they looked at the problem And it was a difficult problem because there's lots of places you could start, and they came up with some great recommendations for a 4-phased approach. What we're talking about here today is phase 1, but where they talked about a 4-phase approach of how over the span of the coming years should Oshkosh address their facility needs. February 2020, the school board unanimously approves the 4-phase long-range master facilities plan. And then in March, they selected Bray Architects through a competitive RFP bid process for the phase 1 work. They've been working with us the past couple of months, and in May and especially in June, we conducted board workshops on facility needs and funding options. That culminated last night in the board meeting, where the board had a very robust conversation about what are we going to do, and the board chose to hand it to the community again and say, here's 2 referenda questions. This is how we envision we should proceed. So the facilities context, I think Dr. Cartwright's going to handle that one.
Thank you, Dr. Gundlach. So within the facilities context, there's a few things to take into consideration. When you're talking about educational facilities, typically facilities used for educational purposes are typically around 50 to 60 to maybe 70 years as far as a lifespan of the facility. And that can be confusing for people. And when we're talking about lifespan of a facility, what we're saying is without having to go in there and doing significant renovations to the facility itself, because oftentimes people will think, well, what about Harvard? What about Yale? Those are, those buildings have been around for years and years. Well, they've also spent an exorbitant amount of money within those facilities in order to do complete renovations within those buildings. Well, the outside may remain the same. The inside has definitely been updated in order to accommodate the needs of today's learners and what those educational environments look like. So within here in Oshkosh, though, what's important for us to understand is that nearly 3/4 of our schools were built before 1970, meaning that a large portion of them are more than 50 years old. In fact, the average age of our facility right now, including the new construction, is 66 years old. Our oldest building, it was built in 1880, and it actually is the facade of what we see over at Reed Elementary School right now. There's only been 2 schools recently that have been built, only 2 within the 21st century. And the last time we did come to the community to request funding was back in 2012, and that was to build the new Oaklawn Elementary School. And so this is the last time that we've come to the community asking for a capital referendum. Prior to that, it was in 1999 for the new Jefferson. And again, a lot of our facilities are much older than our neighboring communities.
So that covers some of the facility replacements for the new middle and the new elementary school. But what about the safety and security improvements? One of the things that we've become keenly aware of as a community is that we need to continue to work on safety, security in our schools. And one of the side effects of some of our schools being so old is that they were designed in a totally different time. So these safety and security improvements are largely renovations to the office areas, often swapping space somewhere else in the facility to move the office area towards the exterior of the building, making it a secured entryway into the school so that we can provide the maximum amount of safety and security for the students. You'll see here on this chart, there's several schools throughout our community that are getting some pretty significant work done, but you'll also notice there's some gray lines. These gray lines are areas that we are not going to be expending dollars because in the facility consolidation plan, the facilities are either slated to be replaced, to go away, or to be repurposed. So we wouldn't want to be putting money into those facilities where we weren't going to get the full benefit out of it. You can see there, just looking at Merrill alone, we would have to add $75,000 just for some basic safety and security improvements. That's in addition to the $12 million you'd need to put into repairing the facility. So all of those taken, put together, accounts for $8.99 million, the majority of which is occurring at North High School, where a small addition out on the front would occur to the tune of about $4.2 million. And then West High School, moving the office area there and swapping spaces would be just over $1.7 million. So this really represents phase one of the 4-phase long-range plan. And what indeed would happen is we would build a new middle school on the Merrill site that would have capacity for the North Side middle school students. It would be about 850 to 900 student middle school, which is not, it's not normal for Oshkosh, because Oshkosh has very, very small middle schools, but it's very normal for most school districts to have a middle school of that size. We would put a new elementary school on the Webster site to accommodate some of the Merrill, Webster, and Washington elementary students. The remaining Merrill, Webster, and Washington students would be put in E. Cook, Reed, or Oak Lawn via some minor boundary changes. We would then close Merrill and Webster schools due to the new building construction, and the future of Washington Elementary, obviously we'd be closing that school too, and that site is yet to be determined. But in a sense, what we would be doing is building a new middle school, moving the students into there. We would then move the Washington or the Webster elementary students into the Merrill site for a year while we built the new Webster site school. And then we would move all those elementary students back, and then we would have to decide what to do with the existing Merrill facility. Obviously, the Webster facility would be built on its exact site, so we demolish and rebuild on site. So the new elementary school design objectives was really around the idea, if we're going to build a school for the next century, what does it really have to have? We would enhance building safety. We would align the physical spaces with modern teaching philosophies. In a sense, what this does in a nutshell is it creates flexible learning spaces that will meet not only the needs that are there today, but also the needs 10, 20, 30, 50, 75, 80 years from now. So the sites are designed to be incredibly flexible in terms of space use. We'd have grade level cohorts in close proximity to each other, so they're not spread out throughout the school. We'd have collaborative spaces open for students, staff, and community members. We'd have strategic placement in the office, obviously, and the media center to make them the hubs of the building. We would provide playground equipment, so the exterior of the building would be able to serve the students just as well as the interior. And we would have enhanced access to staff. Remember, part of the reason that we're going down this path was the concept of getting away from very ultra tiny schools and going to more of a 3 to 4 track elementary school design. This allows us to maximize our use of resources and put the most adults with the kids possible at the same cost. So we're not spreading staff throughout the district like we are today. So here is the new elementary school site plan concept. This is just conceptual at the moment. You'll see it's built on the existing Webster site. You can see there, and we'll look at the floor plans better in a moment, but there's different spaces for drop-off zones. There's parking, so there's not as much parking going on the streets, which I think the neighbors would appreciate. You'll see that the building is designed into zones where on the first floor, we're going to be having K1, 2, and on the second floor, we're going to be having 3, 4, 5. And you'll also see some hard surface playground space, etc. The nice thing, the cool thing about this site is it is in a beautiful location, overlooking the park and overlooking the lake. And what an awesome place to have a school for us to be proud of.
And one of the things also, Dr. Gundlach, on that slide, going back to it, is also understanding for our community members, as you can see here, we're actually looking to put a lot of the traffic, the parking traffic that currently exists, and getting it more onto the site itself. So that will give some relief to that community and that neighborhood. With our drop-off locations on Melvin Avenue, it's a continuation of what our current drop-off areas. So we're not doing anything that's going to be significantly different than what they're doing. And you can also see that we have a lot of green space that's available to our students here. And we were very intentional on bringing that more towards the center of the school. So that way, when we're looking at appropriate supervision and for students to be able to access equipment, it's really kind of more in the hub of that school as well. And as you can see, even down right there in the middle of the site itself, is where you have a lot of your course services. So that way they're able, students have easy access in order to get to those core services, whether it be administrators, whether it be pupil services, and maybe your school psychologist, your social worker, behavior interventionist. So it's very intentionally designed in order to have the school look as though, look and feel smaller than what candidly even may currently exist at some of our sites.
So here's the floor plan, and you can see on the first floor we have kindergarten, first and second grade together. We have appropriate special education and support spaces in proximity to where the kids are. This may seem like a small thing, but it really is. It's really effective when we don't have to have kids moving such long distances when they need extra supports. So designing it from the ground up, this allows us to take advantage of that. You'll see on the second floor, that's where we have our STEM library spaces. You'll also see third, fourth, and fifth grade will be existing in pods in those spots as well. So the middle school design objectives were very similar to the elementary school with a few different changes. Obviously build with modern safety and security features. The objective of the middle school, given that we have about 850 to 900 students in that school, is to have about 150 students per grade level teams. That in some ways is even smaller than what we currently have. It's just we're trying to make a larger school feel small. And that's a great way to do it. And a lot of middle schools do that. Grade levels are designated to specific floors. So we have a 6th, a 7th, and an 8th grade floor. And it really does promote 21st century learning by creating those flexible spaces that I referenced. Small group instruction, specialized learning spaces, access to full-time specialists dedicated to students and staff. Once again, we're not spreading staff amongst several small sites, and we're not having them spend their time driving between sites. Windshield time is lost instructional time. So this really does help us out with that. The administration and pupil services would be centrally located along the main corridors, which helps quite a bit. And we'd have space for staff collaboration, meetings, and preparation. It's a very community-oriented design with playground equipment, meeting spaces that could be used after hours, large gymnasium, and cafetorium. And here is the footprint. Now on the left side is sort of a blown out view where you can see where it shows in the lower right corner the soccer fields. That's where the existing Merrill School is sitting today. In the upper left corner is where the existing athletic fields are. So that's where the new site, the new school would be constructed. You'll also notice that there's some parking spaces there attached to it, which also would be welcome news for people in the neighborhood where we wouldn't have so many cars on the streets. On the right-hand side is a little bit more of a zoomed in look at what that site would look like. We'll look at the floor plans in a moment, but you can see the site is designed to be as compact as possible, as well as limit the traffic flow, and is constructed very well on that existing parcel.
In fact, as you're looking at the site, you'll notice that on the Jackson Street, you'll notice that we've intentionally designed it to stay away from the Jackson Street area as much as possible, since we know that is a major thoroughfare. So it's a very light touch that we have right now. And that light touch that you're seeing is actually for deliveries. So it's not a student entry, and it's obviously, or for receiving, I should say. And it's not an area that would be frequented as an ongoing traffic would occur. You can also see up on Nevada Street is where we would have like our student drop off with our buses. And then continuing on Kentucky Street is where we would have the parent drop off located within there. And Dr. Gundlach had specifically had mentioned before, and I know I had also spoken about, we're really going for a school within a school kind of feel. And so you will see located within here that we actually have pods that are located. So this helps you to really make what may feel like a large environment really feel and realize it into a much smaller environment. So for each grade level, there are actually 2 different pods to support that school within the school concept. And again, you'll see that the administration, the people services, a cafeteria are all central areas with separate academic areas. And then on that first floor, you'll also see, over on the top portion here, the northern side, we definitely have those academic areas. But as you get more towards the center and more to the southern areas is where you're seeing some of those community functional areas. So that way you have a true separation that's occurring between academic versus supporting our community and involving our community within our facilities.
So to look at going back to the financial part of the 107 million breakdown, this is a breakdown of the infrastructure updates that was referenced earlier in the presentation. They're a little more spelled out here and itemized with the dollar amounts attached to those. So again, this is these $9.3 million worth of infrastructure updates are updates that are needed and necessary that we are unable to put in our normal operating budget. Again, with 20 buildings spread out, there becomes a large maintenance dollar amount that gets attached to the different buildings we needed to maintain. So this is a breakdown of what we have. And again, these are just a few of the buildings that we have, knowing and recognizing that several of the buildings we're looking at addressing within phase 1 and early phase 2 down the road. So those buildings aren't even included in what some of the potential needs are there. And then again, this is a breakdown of what the $107 million overall referendum question is asking for. We've got the safety and security part for just under $9 million. We've got the new elementary school for just over 35 million, the new middle school for just over 53 million, and the infrastructure projects for a little over 9 million to come to that $107 million question amount.
So here's the actual calendar breakdown. If we were fortunate enough to get community support for this, how would things transpire? The first thing that would happen in the summer of 2021 is we would begin looking at some of the less intense projects that are more along the infrastructure side. While that's occurring, we would be doing the final design of the middle school. While we have a floor plan, that's just it. It's a rough floor plan right now. And we would be taking into account, obviously, a lot of our staff as well as community members in the final design of what the school is going to look like. That design would occur in 2021. We would then construct the school in 22, leading for an opening date in 2023. Once that school is open, we would be doing some of the same things at the elementary level, and that school would open in 2024. So one of the things we wanted people to really take away from this is, while we are going to be voting on this in November, even if we are successful in getting community support for that, it's going to be phased in over 4 years. It's going to take us 4 years to phase this in. It's going to be funded over a 20-year span, and we're going to use it over a 100-year span. So it really is a longer range project, and it will take some time to build out.
So what happens here is when we're taking a look at what's being proposed is we are going to be reducing the number of schools in order to maximize our use and our efficiency. So this one change on phase 1 would take our 5 existing schools. So it would be Webster Elementary School, Webster Middle School, Merrill Elementary School, Merrill Middle School, and Washington Elementary School, and consolidate that down into 2 schools. So a new elementary school and a new middle school. By doing that, it's also taking a look at where we know we have costs that are associated with our aging and our outdated facilities. By doing that, again, we're maximizing that use and the efficiency. It definitely also continues to support our school safety and our security, as well as addressing those projects that are outside of our means through our typical budget to address those infrastructure and maintenance needs. where are the outcomes on this? Well, there's a lot here. It allows us to provide that appropriate level of academic support as well as support services for our students by having our staff and resources more easily accessible. Because we have so many schools right now, and because so many of our schools are so small, what happens is we end up having staff that put in windshield time. They are driving from school to school. There are times where a student may need a service, but the person is not available or is not available at that site on that day because they're already spread out amongst 2 to 3 other schools. In other words, they serve 2 to 3 schools total. And so what ends up happening is now where there's a need, we're not able to appropriately serve that need for that student. By consolidating this, again, going back to that use and the efficiency is not just for the actual facility, but it's also for how can we give the best environment, educational environment, and services to our students, as well as remaining operationally efficient. The new facilities provides for that modern and those flexible spaces and helps us to be able to deepen that level of learning that's occurring within our students. And it also allows us to keep pace with our surrounding districts. In fact, we want to exceed what our surrounding districts are doing right now because we want Oshkosh. We want Oshkosh to be a destination community for people to live, work, and play. And it's going to be very important. And we know that your educational facilities, the buildings themselves oftentimes are the driver of that. It can be your driver for your economic development as well. So when people are driving by facilities, when they say outdated facilities, a lot of times they make their decisions based on that. When they see facilities that are modernized, they'll make their decisions based on that as well. And so driving that economic component here is really important because especially as we go forward right now in some of the unknown times, ensuring that we do what we can do in order to stimulate Oshkosh's economy is going to be critically important.
So this would be the ballot question for the capital referendum. And again, working within our legal parameters kind of limits us on how we are able to word this. But we worded this as to allow the school board the most flexibility that they could have. So instead of writing it where we were going to automatically remove both buildings and build the new facility right where the other one was, we put potential removal to give us flexibility within the Merrill site. Because we want to have the most options we have for the board moving forward on what happens with the old building should this pass. So then the tax impact is at the bottom of this. So we wanted to really take into account the current economic time and what's going on with the COVID period right now and try to phase this in as much as we possibly could. So the first tax impact year would be 2021, and it would be a 48 cent per $1,000. So for a $100,000 house, you're looking at a $48 impact on your taxes. In the second year, in 2022, it would be a 70 cent increase. So roughly $70 on a $100,000 home. And from 2023 through the remainder of the 20-year borrowing, the mill rate would be a steady 85 cent increase or $85. And again, these are with pretty conservative assumptions right now to give us some flexibility on changes in the market currently and moving forward for roughly the next year. So that was a good way to phase this in without having to compromise on any of our assumptions.
So we also understand the question of why now. Well, let's talk about that from the operational referendum in November. We know that our funding currently for one of our operational referendums will expire in June 2021. And then we have the second one that will expire in June 2023. If we do not renew these referendums, then that would result in $7.95 million in cuts over the next 3 years. Going forward and looking at this though, looking to renew this, we also understand that there's no tax increase. It's just simply renewing the existing funding previously approved by the voters. It allows us to continue our current academic programs and our support services, and it advances our community developed strategic plan, which came from the citizens of Oshkosh. Combining the two previously approved referendums into one eliminates that need for and the cost of repeatedly returning to the voters with that renewal of the operational referendum sunsetting in 2030.
The next question is the same question. Why now in terms of the capital referendum in November? The board had a very robust conversation about that last night. First off, it advances the work of the Facility Advisory Committee that was approved by the school board some months ago. Currently, we have historically low interest rates and an extremely competitive bid market in terms of constructing new facilities. Also, they were keenly aware of the fact that the construction inflation is approximately 4% per year. So every time we wait, the cost continues to ramp up. We saw it as an equity issue. The East Side schools, which would be improved, are some of the oldest, serving our most diverse students. Also, if you'll recall, Merrill had the most repairs needed at over $12 million. So it was a logical place for the Facility Advisory Committee to start. The facility improvements will take time to implement. Even if we're fortunate enough to get a yes vote in November 3rd, it's going to take, as I showed you, several years before that actually gets phased in. The facility needs are not going away. The option of doing nothing is not an option for our community. We are either going to be spending some significant resources into buildings that are well over 100 years old, or we're going to be modernizing our facilities as well as consolidating our facilities, going from 20 potential facilities eventually down to 14. The community is very aware of education. I think parents are more aware of what goes on in schools now than they ever were, because they've had the kids at home with them for several months. We need to continue to move forward on this. We feel that other communities are continuing to advance, and if Oshkosh does not continue to keep pace, we would not necessarily be that community where people choose as their destination. We believe we have the best community out there, and that it's one that people want to choose as their place to live, work, and play. We just want to make sure that the facilities match the great things that are happening inside the schools.
We also understand that choosing not to pursue the November referendum would signal to our community that the needs that we've already outlined related to both our operational and capital, including the board approved facilities plan, is just not critically important that it could be put on hold. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. Even though we may be in an environment right now where COVID is occurring, that's not going to stop our facilities from aging. And we are still providing services, we are still teaching, we are still providing instruction to our students as well. And so those are things that are ongoing. We also know that by putting both into one ballot, it's going to reduce the taxpayer funds paying for elections and avoid the referendum fatigue that we've heard loud and clear from our community members. Putting it on November also puts it into a presidential election cycle, which ensures high voter turnout, meaning that voters have voice in the decision. It gives them that maximum number of opportunity for our voters to let us know how to proceed going forward with both an operational as well as a capital referendum.
So in summary, the board last night approved placing 2 funding requests on the November 3rd ballot. Question 1 is the operational referendum, which continues the 2 previously approved, maintains the academic programs and services, and has no tax increase.
And the second thing is related to the capital referendum. We know that they will fund phase 1 of our long-range facilities plan. It was developed with community input and unanimously approved by our school board. The phase is completed in 4 years, financed over 20, and again, used over 100 years. Our phased-in annual estimated tax impact, again, for the 21-22 year would be $48 per $100,000 valuation. For 22-23 would be $70 for about per $100,000 valuation. And then going forward, it would be $85 per 100,000 valuation. So it's important because I also saw one of the questions in there. The question was, is it 85 plus 70 plus 48? No. It's just a phased in approach because the work in phase one has the different components added into that. We will borrow when it's appropriate to borrow. Hence, the year one borrowing would result in the $48. Year two borrowing would be the 48 plus the difference in order to get you up to $70. And then the year three would be $85, and it would be at the $85 rate going forward.
So that is the information we had to share with you today. I know it's a lot of information and it's been a lot of work over the span of several years. At this point, I think we would just open it up for questions.
We have been getting a number of questions. I think you've seen some of them, and I've had a couple others that came through. So I'm gonna, in the time remaining we have here, I'm gonna try to pull some of those together. Certainly the critical question it seems everybody is asking is, timing is everything. And, the community is stressed. COVID has put tremendous strain on people's lives, their livelihoods, and, issues relating to keeping, paying the bills, et cetera, are kind of, on a lot of people's minds. I mean, we have over 11% unemployment now in Oshkosh, which is, a few months ago, it would have been unheard of. So, what with the problems that we have right now, going out to the community right now to basically adopt a $107 million capital campaign and the extension of the operational campaign. I mean, why are you choosing to do this now?
I think each of us have an answer to that. Now, Drew, if you would like to start.
Yeah, if I can just start on some of the financial reasonings behind it. As was kind of mentioned in the presentation, right now we've got historically low interest rates, and we really want to take advantage of that. This is a long-term decision and a long-term outlet. It's not looking at the immediate. While we did look at the immediate for the tax impact on what's happening, the other large consideration we're looking at, for every 0.5% that the interest rate fluctuates, it has a $6.5 million impact either way on what this bond, the interest is going to be on this offering. So if we're getting interest rates right now around 1%, and we put this off and it goes up to 1.5 or 2%, you're looking at $6.5 to $13 million of additional interest we're going to pay by delaying it, depending on where that interest rate goes. Similarly, if our projections are based on a 3% and we're able to finance it at 1%, you're looking at that reduction of that 6.5% times every 0.5 percentage point that we go lower. So it does work both ways, but we're not going to see interest rates go down from where they are now. I haven't heard a single economist say that they're going to go down. They're only going to go up. And again, at every 0.5% costing the district $6.5 million, that's a lot of money over a long term, where this economic situation we're in now is hopefully a very short term situation and not an extended term.
I think part of that question is I think people recognize the need. I think people see that our facilities do need improvement. We need to be competitive, but I think the concern is, given the environment, we roll these referendums out and it fails. And if it fails, what are we communicating? What are we saying as a community to the district? And a lot of times there's someone will read into it that they don't support education. I don't think that's the case at all. So I think there's that real concern out there in terms of putting the voters in that position. And the result may not be, might not be what we all want. Again, sometimes it's a, Nina just went through this process and had to go through it twice in order to get that done. So, I don't know if you have any thoughts or comments in terms of that strategy, but I don't know if there's some of that's involved with that.
Absolutely, John. And some of this also is to take into consideration also, we also recognize that by pursuing this and going down that, we're actually helping the community in itself as well. Take a look at what has happened within the Oak Lawn community, right? What it looks like and how it has changed and how it has stimulated the economy for that neighborhood and then that region as well. So what I'm hoping that people also understand that this is actually a way and also for us to give back to the community. So sometimes it's investing in one way in order to get a larger return on your investment. So that's one aspect that we're asking for our voters to also keep in mind when they're looking at this. Dr. Gundlach, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, John, you brought up and everybody's brought up that same question, and we brought it up too, and the board talked about it as well. The easiest thing for us to do would have been to hold off on this. I don't think anybody would have had a question as to why we were holding off. I think a lot of people on the other side of the issue would have said, no, you have to keep moving on these things. But we talked a lot about that. And one of the things that we also talked about is long range. We believe the COVID-19 situation is a short range thing. I think all of us, and even the experts, think that within God willing, quickly, we get some sort of a vaccine and things are getting back to normal. This is going to take so long to ramp up but that waiting could potentially introduce a lot of costs, as Drew brought up. So it really was a tough decision on, we could wait, but we're probably hurting ourselves by waiting. And ultimately the board decided, let's ask the community, let's ask them what they think. And that's ultimately what a referendum does. We have to provide all the information we can, and then we try to make the decisions the same as we would if it was, for ourselves. And what would we want to see? So it is a tough situation, and it's something that we talked about quite a bit. But we feel that the cost savings of going now is so compelling that we didn't want to take that opportunity away from the voters to make that choice.
Part of your plan is it builds a couple new schools, consolidates some schools, closes some schools. Have you enumerated that efficiency, that cost savings that the district would realize by making those changes? I mean, whether there's reduction in staff, overhead, that kind of stuff.
I don't believe that we've actually enumerated it to the fullest extent at this point in time in order to give you a quantifiable answer on that. We do know, as we've been mentioning, that there are going to be some changes, that there are going to be cost savings. The mere fact that we're not having staff having to go drive from one facility to another facility to another facility, that's one example. Another example is that, for example, we're not going to need, we have 5 principals at 5 schools and going down to 2 schools. So that would be an example. However, I don't want to say that all of the services would be consolidated like that. And in fact, it would actually be quite the opposite, because you're not changing the number of students that you're serving. So there's not a need to reduce the number of teachers that you have. When we're taking a look at pupil services, we're looking at how do we appropriately serve the students and provide them with more, but in a more efficient manner in order to meet their needs.
The district has had a lot of conversations about, maintenance issues, deferring maintenance, et cetera. Let's say this gets approved by the voters, you move forward. How much of that deferred maintenance schedule out there and costs associated still exists?
That's a great question. I don't know that, Drew, do you have that information specifically?
No, I do not. I'll go through with Jim Fox, our Buildings and Grounds Director, and get that number for you, and I can get that back to John when I receive it. But at this point in time, I don't have that number on hand.
And also please remember that what we have put together is a long-term facilities plan. And so even the number that we're going to be giving to you, John, as we go forward, with voter approval and support on this, a lot of those numbers would be coming off of the table. So for example, I know Dr. Gundlach can explain to us, but if the voter approves phase 1, how much of that's going to be coming off the books?
Yeah, so when you look at this, we have $12.1 million for Merrill that we need to repair the facilities. Washington requires just under $3 million. Webster about $6.5 million. So that's $21.6 million right there that comes off. We also have those safety and security improvements that we will not make at those schools because they'd be replaced. When you take all of that in total, it's about $22 million of aging facility cost and security, okay? The cost of the new Merrill and the new middle and elementary school would be $88.68 million when you put those two pieces together. So that means it's just over 25% of the cost of building 2 new facilities that we will be taking off the books. Now that's just in the phase 1 pieces. We have the other phases as well, but I don't have that document in front of me with the Bray study that actually says here are the deferred maintenance pieces. Plus we have some other deferred maintenance that Jim Fox has on his list that needs to be added in there as well. But we can get that information. That's good information to have.
And just a reminder again, when we're talking about just those costs, we're just talking about the actual physical building itself and not even touching the inside where it comes into those educational environments.
Yeah, so you're still sitting there with a 120-year-old building, but the tuck pointing's been done, which people don't necessarily realize is an issue.
You know, kind of related operational costs with this is consolidate schools and do those sorts of things. What kind of stress does that put on transportation, moving kids, you know, from parts of the community, whether you're busing them or whether they're walking?
The wonderful thing about this is that these sites that we're talking about are actually fairly close to one another. We're not talking about very large distances. We're not talking about across town or anything to those effects. The other thing to take into consideration is that we have just started, you know, a contract with the city right now. I don't know what the future will look like with that just yet, because it starts on September 1st is the first day, but where students get free access to city bus transportation. So if walking is not a feasibility, or riding your bike, or having someone being able to drop you off at school, those transportation options are still available for our students right now as well.
Well, we've hit our 11 o'clock time, and I'm going to ask one last question because I think it's on a lot of people's mind. What's going to happen September 1 with schools?
So to be candid with you, we have a survey that's going to be going out the early part of next week to our parents in order to get some additional information. We have scheduled on August the 5th, we're doing a special board meeting where we are going to be rolling out what those plans are going to be looking like for September. What I can tell you is our goal is based on where we are today, which as you know is a fluid situation. Our goal is to offer as much face-to-face instruction as possible. So either it would be full-time face-to-face or potentially looking at a hybrid model that would combine face-to-face with maybe some online learning as well. That's to be determined, as I mentioned before, because we want to get the feedback from our parents as well as we're making these final recommendations.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you very much, Vickie, Dave, and Drew for joining us. Very informative. I know there's more to come on this, a lot more discussion in the next several months. You know, we'll be doing what we can to make sure we're getting information out to to the community and our members specifically. And I know we'll be having more conversations with Vickie and her staff on this. So again, thank you for joining us. This has been recorded. It will be on our website for people to view again. So we'll be promoting that. Next week, we have a virtual town hall with Amplify Oshkosh. They'll be talking about cybersecurity and identifying risks associated with that. So that should be fascinating. I think Dave might be involved with that. He's engaged in a lot of different things here for us. all good stuff. So again, with that, thank you for joining us, and again, thank you for to Vickie and her team for being here for us, and more to come later. So we're signing off, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.